possible harbinger of things to come in 2024 as a special election in Florida flipped a state house seat from Republican to Democrat in what news outlets were calling an earthquake victory. In this close race, Democrat Tom Keene beat out Republican Erica Booth 11,390 votes to 10,800 votes to win the seat. The district has seen a massive shift in political allegiances over the past few years, first going for Biden by 5 points in 2020, then shifting decisively to DeSantis in 2022 by 11 points.
Meanwhile, in general election news, former President Trump continues to lead President Biden nationally. A new poll by HarrisX has Trump up 4 points over his opponent, his likely opponent, I should say. When outsider candidates like RFK Jr. and Cornel West are factored in, that lead shrinks to only 3 points. Notably, the poll has RFK Jr. at around 12% support.
So I saw people talking about this result, and this is another one of those cases where, the polling indicates very favorable conditions for Republicans. There's a lot of reason to think 2024 could be very favorable for Republicans. Trump way ahead of Biden in swing state polling. Biden having so many issues, the economy, the Middle East, et cetera. Even many Democrats would prefer another candidate. Many independent voters, I think he's too old. He is much older than he was last time he ran. All of those indicators trending well for Republicans, but when push comes to shove, when you actually hold votes somewhere, there's some resilience to the Democratic Party under Biden. That was true in the 2022 midterms. It was really true in the 2022 midterms, where despite very favorable conditions, you had the Senate remain in Democratic hands, the House. The Republicans taking the House by not as clean a margin as might have been expected, and then the smaller number of races we had in 2023 was much the same. And here's a district that went for Biden, then was looking solidly red for DeSantis. Now back to Democrats, showing that. Maybe, is it just all vibes? Is it when it comes to it, Biden prevails?
So I do think that abortion still looms large in the public's collective mind's eye. I think that radicalism from parts of the Republican Party on certain really important issues like abortion are going to help Democrats, especially in local races where they're not being bogged down by negative perceptions of Joe Biden. I saw a report, I think it was about Michigan, that showed how much more popular Gretchen Whitmer is, how much more popular a generic Democrat is in the state than Joe Biden. Joe Biden specifically is hurting, especially in Michigan, because of the large Arab American population there and their criticism of how he's conducting the siege on Gaza. But generally speaking, Biden has gone from being a neutral Democrat that benefited from not having a lot of baggage, and you could just slot in and say he'll check all of the Democratic boxes, to being someone who has managed in just the last, I'd say, year or so, the tail end of his administration, really anger a lot of core constituencies. Remember, it was just at the end of last year that after years of not having to pay their student debts, Biden made the choice to turn those student debt payments back on. This is not a conversation about whether the Supreme Court is ultimately responsible for overturning the student debt policy. This was Biden's choice to end Donald Trump's student debt moratorium that had been going on since 2020. He chose to do that right after midterms in a move that many people felt was a kind of a bait and switch, inducing young people to the polls, inducing not so young people to the polls, as it's not just kids with student debt these days, and then saying, actually, I'm going to negotiate away this one lingering COVID-era benefit that you are benefiting from in order to benefit me in my negotiations over the debt ceiling, I believe it was at the time. All of those things are adding up, and of course, Gaza looms large, and I think the central question that Democrats are going to have to answer as they head into this election year, is whether they think that people's concerns about having a national abortion ban or whatever it's going to be outweigh their moral commitments to opposing the slaughter of 24,000 people in Palestine, or what they feel like is a real thumbing of the nose at them and their economic priorities over student debt, the PRO Act, not getting a $15 minimum wage, or any of the other milquetoast promises, honestly,
right.
Very milquetoast, moderate, populist promises that Joe Biden has reneged on.
Right. I don't support any of those policies, but I'm not a Democrat. I understand that they are important to Democrats, and it does, I agree, increasingly it looks like if you are a Democrat, you're looking at Joe Biden like, what did I actually get out of this? And the whole, but their strategy is just to scare people with, but it's Trump. Remember? He says crazy things. You can't let him be president again. Of course, the media is not even putting him on TV, so people are forgetting what they disliked about Trump in the first place, which I think is a problem they have to grapple with. On that note, CNN has decided to cancel its GOP primary debate after just one candidate said that he would join. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis agreed to take the stage, but third-place Iowa finisher Nikki Haley refused unless Trump participated, which, shocker, he would not. In a post on X, Haley wrote, "We've had 5 great debates in this campaign. Unfortunately, Donald Trump has ducked all of them. He has nowhere left to hide. The next debate I will either be with Donald Trump or with Joe Biden. I look forward to it." So it looks like that's the end of the debates.
Do you think this is a savvy move on Nikki Haley's part? Because it does seem like, unlike Vivek Ramaswamy, she really benefited from her debate performances. Her polls went up and she was taken more seriously as people saw more of her. You know, is she giving up on an opportunity to continue to gain on Ron DeSantis? Or is she basically saying, hey, it's looking pretty good for me in New Hampshire, why rock the boat?
I mean, I think it's that. And also because I think she maybe now is, you've sold me on this, I think she's running for second place. I think she's running for VP. And that just involves destroying DeSantis at this part. So she's already way ahead of him in New Hampshire. Why even give him the opportunity to maybe get some, I mean, it's unlikely, but get some momentum going. She wants to, I think at this point she's comfortable staying where she is. Putting in a good showing in New Hampshire and maybe other places, and then expecting to be the VP. I think that's looking increasingly likely to
I mean, look, it could obviously be someone who is not running for office that ultimately gets the VP
That's
ballot.
what I expected. I fully expected that 6 months ago. I thought Trump was going to pick maybe a governor he gets along with, possibly a Tim Scott type person. Kristi Noem seemed to have some momentum among the base, but
if it were somebody that were running, the only person conceivably that is left is Nikki Haley. I have a hard time thinking that Donald Trump is going to extend the olive branch to Meatball Don.
It's not going to happen.
You know, Vivek Ramaswamy is a cute diversion, but I don't see what he really gains for Donald Trump on the ticket. He doesn't fulfill a slot like Mike Pence and the evangelicals, or Nikki Haley with this kind of more moderate approach on important issues like abortion and frankly, diversity on the ticket, which Republicans will criticize and influence the emphasis on when Democrats do it, but rush to do the exact same thing. They had one of the most diverse, the RNC in 2020 was more diverse than the DNC, and of course they regularly tout their firsts, Bush 2s, cabinet appointments, all of those kinds of things, as much as Democrats do. One last point about Tom Keene. I do think sometimes we cover these races a little bit too horse racy without looking at what the candidates themselves are actually emphasizing. And we've seen in many unexpected election results over time, like, for example, Danica Rowan becoming the first trans state, I think it was a state House or Senate in Virginia back in, I think that was 2018. People were surprised by that, but if you look at how she ran, she was emphasizing potholes in the roads, these really basic infrastructural issues, and people said, hey, she's from this community, she understands, I get it, and some of the culture stuff just really wasn't a part of that race. I'm looking at Tom Keene's website, and I'm immediately seeing the top video being about reproductive freedom in Florida. I think that, again, is really going to drive people out to the polls. And also talking about the big developers, housing costs, corporate landlords, and housing is such a top issue for Americans right now. I've seen RFK Jr. hitting that note saying, hey, Republicans and Democrats, Biden and Trump, housing has gotten worse under both of those presidencies, and nobody is talking about it and nobody's doing anything about that. And I wouldn't be surprised if that particular issue resonated a lot with Florida voters as well.
Yeah, it sounds like the opponent avoided media interviews but campaigned with slogans that include free and fair elections, and I think was perceived as being very close to Donald Trump on the elections issue, which just continues to be a loser for Republicans in race after race after race. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. More Rising right after this.